all parties have agreed to a structure that will ensure a fair and honest Senate impeachment trial of the former president.
It preserves due process and the rights of both sides.
So as we go into former President Trump's second impeachment trial, we find a bare majority of Americans supporting the idea of him being impeached, potentially barred from running for office again. Between 50 and about 55, 56% of Americans, depending on the specific poll. And that does reflect a slight increase from where we were last year with the first impeachment trial, where on average it was maybe closer to 48, 49% of Americans who supported removing President Trump at that time. But it does also reflect the continuing really stark partisan divisions in American society, because we see virtually all Republicans opposed to the impeachment, 80, 85%, with the remainder saying, primarily saying that they don't know or they're unsure, versus almost all Democrats saying they're in favor of the impeachment, 90% plus in most polling. And then independents or people who are sort of not political are split a little bit, with a little bit more on the impeachment side than not. And that's really reflecting kind of the difference we're seeing from last year, as independents have moved a little bit more towards impeachment. But fundamentally, it really underlines how the country continues to be divided and President Trump continues to be extremely divisive.
Well, I think for Democrats, there's a genuine interest in accountability. There's a precedent being set here. If you are to believe the argument that it's unconstitutional to try President Trump, what it tells future presidents is that, once January comes and you're a lame duck, you can do whatever you want. And I don't think that's really a precedent that any American wants. I don't think Republicans want a lame duck Joe Biden to behave that way. And so I think we need to think seriously about what happened on January 6th, the president's role in that, and how to hold that individual, as well as the individuals who directly participated in it, accountable. But of course, there are political implications here. There's a political side to it. Democrats want Donald Trump to go away. They also recognize that while Joe Biden beat Donald Trump in the popular vote, by 6 million votes, that doesn't quite reflect how close this election was. If 44,000 votes changed in 3 states, Donald Trump would have been reelected. And so from a political perspective, Democrats really benefit if they can nullify his ability to run for president again, out of fear that it might be closer next time, or if he runs again, he might actually win. For Republicans, the political dynamics are a little flipped. I think there's a lot of Republicans who just want Donald Trump to go away. And they might not say it in polls, they might not say it on the House floor, but the idea that if we can just let him be and not move forward with an impeachment trial, that might really motivate his voters to see him continue in politics and run again, the Republican Party might be better off. So it's a real political balancing act on both sides right now.
Yeah, I think the public opinion research we've seen over the last month has really sort of shown a couple of things to be happening. One is there's been this sort of long-term realignment of what it means to be a Democrat, to be a Republican, and that's really just sort of hastened in the last month as Trump has left the White House and as he sort of started building sort of the MAGA party, which maybe is the Republican Party, maybe ends up being some third party thing that he and his people found. But what we're seeing is a couple of things. One, about 2/3 of the people who identify as Republican continue to really have their primary fealty to President Trump. He continues to be sort of the lodestone for the majority of people in the party. And then there's about 1/3 who are much cooler on him. They're the ones who potentially condemn the actions around the assault on the Capitol. And I think this is where you actually start to see a little bit of the limitations of what polling can do, because polling really reflects how people feel right now. It's not really good at helping people sort of think about the future or think about long-term consequences. And that's where you're seeing things like Mitch McConnell's decision making about trying to sort of marginalize Trump and trying to have a path forward for the Republican Party, because we're also seeing in our data people sort of leaving the Republican Party, people who used to identify as Republican, potentially even voted for Trump in November, now identifying as independent, now identifying as sort of unaffiliated. And the real question mark is, does a sort of smaller, more Trumpian Republican Party have the power, have the electoral power to win at the national level just based on that group, without all of these sort of more, potentially, I don't know if they're actually moderate, but people who are just less dedicated to Trump himself? I think that's the big question. I think people like McConnell say no, and people like Trump and his supporters say yes. And I don't think we necessarily know yet, and we won't until 2022 or probably even 2024.
Yeah, like Chris said, there are really there's several options. Two of them involving partisan politics for President Trump. One is that he really becomes a kingmaker in the Republican Party. That fealty that Chris talks about, 2/3 of Republicans still seeing him as a party leader and seeing him as a positive force is real. It's serious. And when a candidate leaves office with that type of presence within his own party, he can have extraordinary impact. We saw Barack Obama do this as he was leaving office, endorsing a slate of candidates that he did again in 2018 as a former president. He did again in 2020 as a former president. That has an impact on primaries, and it can have an impact on outcomes in general elections too. And while President Obama has not been, a surging force within the party, he's sort of picked where he engages. Where he engages has been important. And President Trump could really take a cue from President Obama. As much as he may loathe the idea of doing that, it would be an important roadmap for how to be a former president politically. The other, as Chris said, is he could start his own party, which would be devastating to the Republican Party, because I think a lot of Republicans would follow Donald Trump out the door, essentially ensuring a Democratic presidential win in 2024 by dividing the Republican Party in half or in thirds or however it would be, but it would still divide it pretty significantly. Another chance or another possibility is that the president sort of slips away into history and isn't heard from again, and literally goes to Florida to retire and golf all day. It doesn't seem like that's what Donald Trump is made of, but it is a possibility that he just sort of being deplatformed from Twitter, not having a lot of media outlets terribly interested in what he has to say, that he could sort of take a Sarah Palin route and disappear. But there's another real possibility, and that is that the president faces significant legal challenges, whether those are civil suits, whether those are criminal investigations, which we know are ongoing, or both. The president could be too busy fighting these legal challenges to really be engaged in partisan politics, to start his own party, to be that political force. And so I think a lot depends on what Donald Trump decides to do, but also a lot depends on what the Justice Department, the New York Attorney General, the Manhattan District Attorney, what they all choose to do, because that might really determine Donald Trump's future.